Hello, my name is Sui Chung, immigration attorney in Miami, Florida, and I'm currently on the board of the American Immigration Council. I'm here today with my dear friend, Sonia Nazario, who is an award-winning journalist whose stories have tackled some of the country's most intractable problems. She's won many prestigious awards, including 2 Pulitzer Prizes, and she was a finalist for a 3rd Pulitzer Prize. Her recent humanitarian efforts to get lawyers for unaccompanied immigrant children led to her selection as the recipient of many honors, including the 2016 American Immigration Council American Heritage Award. Sonia grew up in Kansas and in Argentina, and she's written extensively from Latin America and about Latinos in the United States. She's been among the most influential Latinos by Hispanic Business Magazine and a trendsetter by Hispanic Magazine.
I was just amazed by the level of determination that I saw by children like Enrique to make it to the United States, to travel thousands of miles. He makes 8 journeys trying to get through Mexico, travels for 3 months. That enormous grit. I would see, children who would lose arms and legs and would get back up on that train because they were so determined to make it into their mother's arms again. And I think when you see that up close with Enrique and other children, you understand that walls are stupid, that nothing will stop a child that is that determined to make it into his mother's arms again. Experiences of a lot of these children, especially 20 years ago when I started reporting about this, was that longing to be together again, that longing for something better than the grinding poverty in places like Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. And now that's really morphed into also the longing for something safer, as feel a sense of safety in getting out of here. And I think that also that willingness to be willing to leave it all, to leave Enrique, to leave his friends and his family and his culture and everything that he knew and loved, to fling himself into the unknown in the United States. I mean, I think it's hard to explain to an American what people go through on this journey. What is it like to be stuck in the back of a truck, being hauled through Mexico where it's, 100 degrees inside and there's so many people packed in there that you can't sit down and you have to pee on yourself, and you're in there for days without food or water. How do you get an American who lives a relatively comfortable life compared to what many migrants go through, get them to really understand what that's like? So you realize that that's what America really gains from migrants, that enormous grit that it takes. We get this self-selecting group of people who are willing to do that, and who are driven enough to leave everything they know and love to come into the unknown and into a new place. And that is what I think has lifted up this country over centuries and made this country great, is people who are willing to do that. And that's what I saw in Enrique and in so many of these children. I mean, last year we had 76,000 Enriques, children who came to this country by themselves and were apprehended at our southern border. So this story has grown in numbers and in significance, unfortunately, since I first started looking at this 2 decades ago. I think it's important, and this is how I felt when I started writing Enrique's journey, is for people in the United States to have a greater understanding of who their new neighbors are. Really, many people analyzing the 2016 elections believe that the immigration issue was less an economic issue and saying they're taking my job than I feel that my identity is being challenged, that the people around me don't sound like me and don't look like me. And so I think what reading the book and helping people put themselves in the shoes of a migrant boy and their family, it helps them understand who those new neighbors are, and that they're not as threatening as they think that they are, and that in fact they've brought many good things to this country. And I think journalists don't write enough about, not in a Pollyannish way, but in kind of a straightforward way about how these migrants have revitalized cities and do many jobs that Americans simply don't want to do. We're seeing that now with COVID and these essential workers, how Latinos are much more likely to get COVID, the highest group to get COVID percentage-wise, because they are many of these essential workers in the meat packing plants, cleaning hotels, going into the service sector. So I think it's just trying to get people to understand who migrants are and what they have brought to this country. But I also think in terms of coverage, too much of immigration is people screaming at each other from opposite sides of the political divide. And I think we need to talk about solutions that really work for all sides. And I've stressed in recent years, really dealing with the root causes of migration. Okay, you say you want fewer migrants coming here, then you have to deal with what's pushing people out of these extraordinarily violent places, the most violent places in the world, like El Salvador and Honduras. I think we need to focus a lot more on what are the solutions that the U.S. can help promote. And I know we've done a lot of bad things in these countries, and some people say just stay out of it, United States. But what I argue is that if we're doing something positive, we should encourage our government to do more of that. So I really stress the need for solutions in those home countries, solutions in the U.S. in terms of our war on drugs and completely changing that to dealing with more prevention and treatment to reduce the use of drugs, which create a lot of the misery in these countries. And I think we need to show why it's important to morally and in terms of the economics and other positive things in this country to remain open to refugees and asylum seekers. I feel we have a moral obligation after World War II. My family has fled persecution for 100 years on both sides of my family. My mother left Poland as a young girl. She's Jewish, before World War II. And we turned away the ship, the St. Louis, with hundreds of Jews on board during the war and said, you can't dock in the United States. We sent back those Jews to their death. And we promised after World War II that we had a moral reckoning, and we said, we will never do this again. And yet by shutting our borders to refugees and asylum seekers, we are turning people again back to their deaths. And that's not who we are. And a majority of Americans agree in poll after poll, that is not who we are. And so I think our government has been hijacked by a very small minority who think otherwise. And I think it's time for us to fight back and say, we need to be compassionate, perhaps turn away more economic migrants now if there's a larger number of asylum seekers and refugees at our doors. But it's in the hard times that we need to step up and do the right thing. It's easy to do the right thing in the easy times, but now is when it's really important. And for me personally, I've taken an approach that some in the center left don't agree with. When I go speak in very conservative parts of the country, I start by acknowledging that there are some real concerns about immigration, that if you don't have a high school degree and you're forced to compete with certain immigrants in certain industries, then you may see downward pressure on your wages, and I wouldn't like that. And so I kind of walk through and I say, I hear you. You have some concerns. I think only when you do that can you capture people to listen to the rest of what you have to say. So my emphasis has been, let's push for addressing root causes and funding that. Let's push for greater compassion. Let's not lock up people in these horrible prisons. Let's shut down the prison industrial complex. I mean, we need a civil rights movement that goes against this buildup of these prisons that put these people in places where there's maggots in the food and people die from lack of health care. They are horrible places. It's horrible what we are doing to migrants right now in these places. So release people with an ankle monitor, release them with a social worker. They do show up to their court hearings. It's a lie that they don't show up. So let's tell the truth about these things to our friends and neighbors. Let's get the courts out of the Department of Justice so that you actually have courts that are fair, that mete out equal justice to people. Right now, they've been heavily politicized, and the judges are being pressured to say no to all asylum cases. Let's get lawyers, especially free government lawyers, especially for children. You know, why should a toddler go before an immigration judge with no one by their side to help them argue their case? That is criminal. That should not happen in this country. That is immoral. But part of convincing the conservatives is to also say, I believe that if you are then, if you lose your case, if we make things better on the front end, much more compassionate on the front end, if you then lose your asylum case, Democrats need to have a policy that adheres to the rule of law, and that we say we acknowledge we cannot take in everyone from around the world. And if we've given you a truly fair process, a big if, then we should deport you. And we believe in the rule of law. And I believe that until Democrats show that to the rest of the other half of the country, we will continue to lose on this issue. So my message has been one trying to say to conservatives, I acknowledge what bothers you about the immigration system and some aspects of this, but they're relatively minor, and you need to focus on the other stuff as well. And I try by saying, I hear you on these things, to open their ears so they are willing to listen to the bigger part of the story. But, you know, I think everyone needs to vote come November. Latinos need to vote. I have been writing about the sleeping giant that will awaken for 30 years. I am so tired of writing that story. Latinos need to care and vote, and we need to make it easier for people to vote and not suppress their vote. But people need to vote. I think people need to write their representatives and say, you know, I am in the silent majority, 75% of the population who do not agree with the current policies on immigration. Support migrant families in your community. I mean, right now during COVID, so many didn't qualify for these supplemental income. And finally, I think to this group in particular, you know, I have seen the best of lawyers. I have seen people who step up and give their time and their sweat and their money, so much of their time, for someone that they don't know, and just because they think it's the right thing to do. And so support the lawyers, support all these groups who are going against the administration to fight these legal battles. It's so critical right now. So I've come to love lawyers.